E-telligence, energizing your email marketing with Kate Barrett.
Hi, and welcome to this month's E-telligence Creative Review. I'm Kate Barrett, the founder of eFocus Marketing.
And I'm Elliot Ross at Taxi for Email.
And every month, we're going to be bringing you the good, the bad, and the ugly of email marketing. But this month, we want to do something a little bit different. As we're still at the beginning of 2020, we thought that we would give you a little review of some of the episodes that we've already recorded so that you don't miss a thing, but also some of the trends that we've seen happening in email design that you need to look out for as you move through this year to make your emails stand out in the inbox. So, the first thing is to make sure that you haven't missed out on any of the episodes that we've already recorded. Back in August 2019, we reviewed this email from Nest. It was a fantastic, personalized email. So go to the link on the screen and listen to our feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything we saw in that email, and some ideas to test in the future for your emails. In September, we looked at a loyalty email from TM Lewin. Again, don't miss out on seeing what they did really well in this email and what could be improved. In October, we reviewed this email from Amex, showing some personalized offers. And in November, this interactive email from the White Company. So that's 4 creative reviews not to miss out on. But now for this episode, we want to give you a quick introduction to some of the design trends that we've seen happening over 2019 that you need to be aware of in 2020. So, Elliot, I know that you received this email from AWS, and the first thing that we want to talk about is creating your template. And this was a perhaps an oops email that was sent out, but it gave us email marketers a real view into what AWS do with their templates. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting email to receive. So AWS is the sort of web hosting and web infrastructure service that's provided by Amazon. And they sent this email, which is basically their template. They sent it by mistake, and it has sort of, has their logo and some sort of, space where they put an image and that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is they have boilerplate text that actually is from, there's a book, I'll find out where it's from actually, but there's a book, a sort of age-old writing book, and it's actually from there, but it's a great few paragraphs. But what's really interesting is they've got this template and they've actually put in this text that is really talking about how to write good copy. So the headline, for example, says, enter a short headline summarizing why this email is important. So, okay, that's cool, makes sense. But then as we get into paragraphs, so this sentence has 5 words, here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences and I use sentences of medium length, and it sort of continues. But the point is they have text in there that is actually guiding people to create good content, rather than just saying, the sort of standard headline goes here, body text goes here, that kind of stuff. So then someone else comes along who's actually writing the content. They can actually put in stuff that is going to be, works for the channel and is actually engaging for the audience, rather than just typing in whatever text they felt that they needed to do. And then lastly, just on the call to action, they have enter a compelling call to action, i.e. not click here, which is a great little touch there. I think click here is one of the sort of crimes that we do as marketers. The kind of background of that is, you should always say what's actually going to happen when you click on it, rather than just saying click here. It doesn't really describe anything, and it's not really that useful for the user. So even sort of find out more is better than click here. There's a guy called Gary Provost, by the way, who wrote the book. The book's called Make Every Word Count, so it's worth finding out. I think it's on Amazon. So that was interesting email, kind of sent by mistake. There's a sort of a bit of a theory that people sent this, that they sent this intentionally as a sort of intentional oops email. I don't really buy that theory because it's kind of too perfect. When those things happen, there's usually a bit more sort of chintzy marketing stuff going on, and there's none of that here. So I think this is a genuine mistake, but it's interesting to see behind the scenes at how AWS put their email content together.
Definitely. I think this is a great example of not only having a template so that you can standardize the layout of what you're sending out to your subscribers, make sure that you're on brand, that everything connects together, but actually using it in a way that we probably haven't really seen before, and using it as a tutorial for your staff on what they should and shouldn't be doing in email. We so often see that kind of Lorem Ipsum text that we all put in there as the standard placeholder. But this is actually using your placeholder text in such a clever way to train your staff. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a great thing to do. The challenge, I suppose, is what happens when it gets sent. It's always bad when you see a bit of lorem ipsum text actually in the wild and it's got sent by mistake. At the end of the day, demonstrably, this did actually get sent. So it's still not perfect. I guess in an ideal world, you would have content that relates to AWS, and it would somehow not look like a mistake if it did actually get sent. You'd have just boilerplate text about the product or whatever. But then you'd have to make sure that all of this kind of process text is elsewhere and still readily available for marketers. So I think this is sort of happy medium. There's probably an ideal way to do it, but it's probably, it's harder to achieve.
Definitely, and that really just kind of compounds the need for a really good QA quality assurance process. It's so important to make sure that before you press that send button, you've gone through that checklist of what should and shouldn't happen in your email. And on the E-telligence podcast, so I've actually got an episode of the E-telligence podcast that's coming up with Email on Acid, where we're going to be talking through some of the important QA processes that you can go through, and there'll be a fantastic download that you can get with that. So look out for that episode as well. But you've got to make sure before you press that send button that everything is in place. And actually, having a template can really help you to do that. So we know that certainly through Taxi for Email, you guys can help put all of this in place, and that's what your whole system is about, right? Is making sure that you've got a template so that you've got different design elements that you can quickly bring in that are going to be right in terms of a design. Obviously, content still needs to be checked, but from a branding point of view, from a layout point of view, you can very quickly start to pull in different design elements that are going to be standardized across a template.
Yeah, exactly. So, Taxi is all about making sure that the person who designs the email can kind of codify their sort of intent of how the template should be used, so that when content people come along to use it, they don't go off brand or have the template work in a different way. Yeah, interestingly, this kind of stuff where we've got text that says, here's what you should do in this headline sort of thing. If this email was sent in Taxi, all of the kind of stuff that says, here's good copy and here's what's useful and what to say on a call to action, we can put those in as sort of hints in the UI, so they wouldn't actually end up in the actual email, but they'd still be readily available for the people doing the content to see.
Brilliant. So that gives you best of both worlds. I think that's a really great way to do it. And I know we've talked about this before earlier in terms of creating that template. And I know that one of the things that you say to do, and I do this with my clients all the time as well, is unfortunately not very good for saving the planet, but print out your last, the last 5 emails that you've sent, the last 6 months worth of emails that you've sent, depending on how many you're getting out there. Stick them up on the wall and see what those design elements are that you're using. See what the layouts are, what the flows are, what all of those different branding pieces are that you need to bring in. And that's going to help you to start put together the bones of that responsive, hopefully, template as well. We want it to be mobile designed as well, of course, but allowing you to have a standardized flow for what you're sending. So I know that you do that with your clients as well a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a really useful exercise, not least because email is one of those channels where you kind of move very quickly, but also 6 months seems like a lifetime ago, but also it seems like you've been doing the same stuff forever. So actually printing out what you've done over a fairly long time just helps highlight that progression that you've done, but also then when you look at your emails and what common shapes you're using and things like that, actually, when you tend to think, oh, we use lots and lots of different designs, when you look at it all together, actually it turns out it's usually only 10 or 15 different individual kind of modular layouts, which is a fairly easy amount of different shapes to work with. Code them up, in a way that really works, and invest the time in making sure the HTML is really, really good, and then off you go from there, and do do email templates and content that really works for the audience.
Fantastic. So having your desktop versions and your mobile versions all there ready to go in one modular template so that you can switch in and out as you go. So I think that's definitely our first trend, or it's not really a trend, it's something that should just be a standard within your strategy, something that you should be doing without even thinking about it. So if you're not doing that, if you don't have a modular template that you can reuse and use those sections again, definitely something that you should be looking at.
Absolutely.
So our next trend that we saw come in 2019 and will obviously continue through 2020 is the introduction of dark mode. So this is where you can change a setting on your mobile device where it kind of quietens down how bright everything is, which is really important with the amount that we use our devices nowadays. You can see some of the stats on your screen there as well. There's a lot of negative impact that has. So what dark mode is really doing is trying to switch that and help to not fix the issue, but if it can to some extent make it better.
Yeah, exactly. So dark mode's kind of interesting. It's been around for a little while, but it's really hit in the last sort of 6 months of last year, partly because it became sort of baked into the version of iOS that got released in sort of October. Also, Android sort of pushed people towards it, and various other apps have been moving towards it as well. Yeah, it's interesting because it does help with your sort of eye strain, and especially if you use your phone a lot. There are some email design challenges, of course, but it is quite jarring if you turn on dark mode and you sort of use a lot of the UI. Everything is dark with white text, and then when you jump into an email and then everything is predominantly white background, it does really stand out, and it's quite a big contrast. So there is quite a lot that we can do as designers to make sure that our emails work and sort of fit into that environment, that we can dig into a bit. So as with everything in email, it's never particularly easy, but there are some fairly easy wins to get started. So there's broadly, I think, 3 different ways that dark mode can happen. So one is similar to a media query, which is what we use for mobile. So on mobile, when we do mobile design, what we tend to do with media queries is we take a desktop email and we say, actually, instead of being in 2 columns, take this second column and put it underneath the first one, for example, or resize this image and make it a bit smaller, that kind of thing. And we do that with CSS. So it's basically take the desktop email and sort of change the shape of it a bit. And we do something similar to make dark mode happen. And we can basically say, when it's dark mode, instead of having the background as white, change the background to dark gray, and change the text from black to white, for example. So you can have a lot of control over what's going on, and you can say, here's how my email should change for dark mode. Now, of course, the challenge for that is basically how things work on iOS for the iPhone, and I think in some Android devices. However, there are other email clients that try to do their own thing, and unfortunately that is where the problems lie, or the challenges. So I think Outlook app in particular basically tries to make its own dark mode out of your light mode version, which is not ideal. So it will try and change anything that's light into dark, and anything that is dark into light, and it will have mixed results. And that's where you've really got to do a lot of testing and make sure that even though it's trying to do it itself, it's actually doing something that is still working. So there are a few things you can do to kind of set that up nicely. So for example, if you've got a logo and you have some white text on that, it's not going to change that logo. It's kind of smart enough to change the color of text if your text is HTML text, but it's not smart enough to change images. So if you are creating logos, for example, and you have white text or you have dark text over white, and that's your kind of standard logo that you want, maybe think about making that transparent and perhaps have a sort of a haze around it or something like that, or a shadow that only shows up when the image is reversed. So think about how images will get flipped around. Maybe think about putting a sort of background or a sort of pill shape around your logo so that it looks okay when the background is either dark or light, for example. So there's definitely a bit of work to do there. Luckily, most of the sort of testing systems, things like Litmus and Email and Acid, have got examples and rendering engines that we can use to test to see how it works there. So, but it is still fairly early days on it. I think Outlook have changed how they do things, or sort of evolved over the last few months as well. So it's a sort of moving challenge, but it's one to keep an eye on.
Fantastic, and I think it just reinforces how you need to understand what devices your subscribers are viewing your emails on, so that you can keep up with all of these trends and all of these differences, and how the different devices and different downloads on those devices will then render those emails. And I think the example that we've got on the screen from Litmus, kind of that boilerplate template, just to show you the difference between normal with the white background and then your dark mode with that darker background. And you were just saying about the logo. So the Litmus logo, for example, kind of fades away in the dark mode. So that's really interesting. And like you said, if you had to put that kind of white pill around it, at least it would have made sure that even in dark mode, that logo would have stood out. So for example, like the icons that they've got with the kind of flowchart and the magnifying glass at the bottom, kind of having that white background. So I think that's really interesting, and we need to, as I said, understand our audience, understand how they're viewing our emails, and make sure that when we're building them, we're definitely taking that into consideration with all of these changes.
Exactly. One last thing though, just to check on, is if you don't do anything for dark mode, it's still worth checking what your current emails look like on dark mode, because if, for example, you don't set any background color at all and you're just relying on it naturally being white, which is kind of what the default has been in most email clients, then you might have some challenges already. So it's worth just checking your existing emails to see what they look like in dark mode before even doing any other code to increase support for it.
That's a really great tip. Okay, definitely a checking point there for everybody for this trend. So the next trend is all about making your emails accessible. And if anyone wants to find out more about this, we actually have a podcast episode that you and I recorded, Elliot, over on e-focusmarketing.com. You will find that podcast. It's episode 9, Making Your Emails Accessible. And we go into lots of different elements here, but the key to it is designing your emails so that whether somebody has a permanent disability, so they're blind, for example, and using a screen reader, or if it's a situational disability where perhaps they are in a noisy environment. So if you've got a video in your email, they're going to need to have subtitles on that video. Or perhaps they've got an infection in their eye and they can't see properly, but it's only temporary. You've got to make sure that the way that you're coding your emails, the way that you're designing them, makes interacting with them and engaging with them as easy as possible throughout all of those different variations of how somebody may be able to see, hear, interact with the email content that you're putting out there.
Yeah, exactly. And even something as mundane as not having a good internet connection, for example, means that the images might not download, for example. So making sure that you can still get the message across with the text that's in your email without relying on the images. All of these things are worth considering. So I think over the last year, we've seen a lot more talk and a lot more awareness about accessibility, which has been great. And also there's been a lot more actual accessible email being made, which is really good. I think there's a lot more that we can build on in the next year, especially getting past, obviously it's important doing the sort of code side of things that helps improve support for screen readers, but there's a lot more that we can do to consider people with all sorts of different challenges. So people with epilepsy, for example, or people with anxiety. thinking about the content that we make and how that might affect them, and how we can make sure that we can avoid sort of causing challenges where we shouldn't be.
Definitely, it's making our designs human. I talk a lot about making our content human and understanding how people will react and interact with the information that you're putting into your emails, and personalized emails and all of that type of thing. But this is bringing your design into a human element. It's making sure that your font size is large enough for people to read, that you've got enough space between the different elements of your email, that you're using a font that's nice and easy to read as well, that you've got a good color contrast between two different colors that might be on top of each other. This is a great example from SurveyMonkey here. We've got a nice lot of white space. Our buttons are spaced away from the content so that they're easily pressable. This doesn't just go for, like we said, those permanent disabilities, but it is the situational. So screen readers, we've mentioned a couple of times. Now, just in everyday life, people are now using Alexa or Siri to start reading their emails out to them. So it's not just somebody who has a blindness, but also if you're in the car and you just want your emails read out to you. So this is really important, and it's going to become more and more important as technology progresses throughout this year as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot more that we can do here. We've already made a good start, but I think there's lots more to move on in 2020.
Excellent. So if anyone wants to find out more, definitely check out that podcast episode. We've got lots of tips and information for you there. But accessibility, like we said, isn't just how you're designing for interaction and how you're designing for viewing and things like that, but it's also thinking about the devices that people are viewing on. So we've got a great example here from McDonald's, who've done a mobile first design that they've really thought about. They know their audience is interacting on a mobile device, so how does that come across in those different devices that they're using? How can people interact with it? How can they make sure that they're using elements that mobile can really push forward? They're separating out their calls to action, they're making sure they're easily clickable. So thinking, again, we've talked about this earlier on, making sure you truly understand the device that people are opening your emails on, and then what it means for your design is so critical in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. I think also the way that they've designed this, there is actually quite a lot of content on there, but it's very easy to digest. Like it's in small sort of chunks. It's not overwhelming. It encourages you to kind of scroll through. It's the kind of content you could perhaps send the same message across 5 or 6 different tweets, for example. So I think that's a good kind of level of getting, not just one message, but a few messages across in a nice, easy to engage with way. So I think they've done a good job here.
Definitely, we need to think about how we're presenting that content and making it really easy to read. So these really short paragraphs, it's short, it's snappy, it's getting straight to the point, and then it's leading people through to more information. I think that's so important. But one of the ways that we can do this now is with interactivity. And again, I've got a podcast episode 10, that I recorded with Jay Oram from Action Rocket, where we talk all about interactivity. And if you go on to that podcast episode, Jay created some fantastic show notes with some examples, some coding for interactive email. There's a whole load of really great content there. So make sure that you check this out. But interactive email is really about making that content easy to interact with. It's making lots of information broken down into bite-sized chunks, and meaning that we can shorten the journey that somebody has to go on to get to that end result. So we've got a few examples flicking on the screen here. We've got one from Home Depot that is allowing you to actually submit your review for that product there and then in the email. You don't need to click onto a landing page anymore. You can submit it right there from the email. So again, we're shortening that journey, making it easier for somebody to complete that action. We've got B&Q, so this is an oldie but a goodie from B&Q, and they've got lots of examples of how they're kind of leading the way with interactivity. And this one is the kinetic design, where you tab through on that right-hand side the different pieces of information, so you can interact with it at your own pace. and consume it in a way that makes sense for you. And then the example from HubSpot on the right-hand side of the screen, where it's using a live poll right there in the email and telling you, kind of in that quiz format, if you've got it right or not. So in amongst their other content, you've got the pop quiz. So it tells you if you've got the answer right or wrong. So the key thing for me here is really to understand why you're using interactive email. We've got the ability to do it now, whether that's through the CSS coding that you're using, whether that's through AMP, and we've got an example of that for you in a minute. But why are you doing it? What is it that you want people to do? We shouldn't just be chucking interactivity in for the sake of it. It should be used to help people get to your end result faster, more easily, more accessibly, depending on what they want to interact with.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the sort of nail on the head there. You've got to, it's always tempting to just do the shiny things because, we've known the rules of email for a long time, and all of a sudden there's a new thing we can try. And I think we should avoid doing that. We have to make sure that we use these sorts of things when they do actually work and they do actually deliver value. So I think these are some good examples where actually they work in context to make sure that the message it gets across better. It enhances the message. I think this is the sort of great use of interactivity.
And then AMP, so we know that obviously Gmail has got support for AMP, and I believe that Microsoft, is it still in beta in Microsoft,
Yeah, it still is, and then also there's a few other platforms as well, but Gmail's, to be honest, looking at the amount of usage of email clients, Gmail's the big one, and the big news for Gmail is also being rolled out to the mobile devices for Gmail as well.
Fabulous. Oh, that's going to be really helpful. And what AMP does is creates that mini website right there in your email. So you can do lots of different actions. You can see 2 examples on the screen there. So there's lots of different things that you can do with it to help people interact there and then without having to go anywhere else. But of course, we've got to think about the device that people are viewing on, the version of the device that they're viewing on. There's a lot of things that we have to think about, and not only that, how we build this. So a lot of ESPs still don't have support for AMP, so look at the platform that you're using, find out if they have support to put this in your emails, because it's effectively a third coding type. And Elliot, stop me if I'm wrong, but it goes alongside your HTML and your text version. You would have an AMP version. Yeah,
exactly. So there's a bit of an overhead there as well. You've got an extra version of basically an extra HTML or the AMP version. So what that means is that if the price changes at the last minute, you've got to make sure you update it in a third place, not just your plain text in your HTML. So there is a bit of a production overhead to that, and I think there have been some noises about that being too much of a challenge for marketers. So I think we've been doing some work on Taxi to make sure that we can help support people basically add the content once and update all 3 places at once. So I think that production challenge is something that can be sorted, but it is something to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's only a handful of brands so far who are using this and trying it out, so it's going to be interesting to see across 2020 how this expands, how people use it, and how easy the email service providers make it to actually implement as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the next thing to talk about in terms of a trend is upping your image game. So we've seen GIFs for a little while. You can see the example from Shopbot there that's really kind of highlighting that key offer as it goes down, the different pieces of content there. We've seen GIFs for quite a while, but it's making sure that you use that GIF in a way that, again, supports your content. It supports the reason for you sending an email. It's not just there for the sake of it, but it helps to bring that content to life. So one of the other things that we're starting to see is a different use of images, and the example on the left from Lyft is a 3D image. So again, what we're doing with both of these things is making your email move from just a flat, static piece of information, and again, we're doing this with interactivity as well, but making it something more interesting, making it something that's pleasing to the eye, that catches people's attention. And you can even mix these 2 trends together. I've got another example from Lyft here, where they're bringing a 3D image and making it animated as well, with the scooter going around there. But the point of this is really to think about what your design is. Think about how you can use your design to support the information that you're putting out there.
Yeah, I think GIFs are great, but you've got to make sure that they're the kind of icing on the cake. They're not the core message. So the example in the middle, I think there's a little bit of a challenge because basically all of the text is animated. That means all of the text is in the GIF. And from an accessibility standpoint, you're going to have to make sure that that text is made available in a different way for people using screen readers or people with images turned off, for example. Whereas in the lift example, you can still, if the GIF doesn't show or if it gets paused on the first frame in Outlook or whatever happens, you can still actually engage with the email. So it's a kind of nice thing on top that grabs your attention. But if it isn't there or if there's a challenge with it, it doesn't stop the email from working.
Totally agree, and that's kind of a core email design element, isn't it? That your images, whether they're static images or GIF images, should back up your content. It should be available though in the text, so your link should be in the text or should be bulletproof buttons so that even with images turned off, they're still available. And it's like you said earlier, obviously on a desktop device or on a webmail device, we still see images turned off a lot, but even on mobile devices where images are turned on by default most of the time, if somebody has a bad internet connection, they're going to lose all of this content. So certainly in the Shopbop example, like you said, you'd want to be putting it in as alt text so that for screen readers, for if those images don't load, you've still got that information. But even better is to use those images to back up your content. Totally agree. The last thing that I just wanted to kind of throw out there, it's not again really a trend, but it's something that we should all be thinking about, how we connect our strategy into our data, into our design, and then using that data to again bring our designs to life. So we've got the example where you've got a personalized image, so this email sent to somebody called Kim, so they've got the K in the two images that they're using there. You've got the example from LinkedIn in the middle, very, very simple design, but it's bringing your data as the main point of interest in the email that's being sent out. And the same with ClearScore, they're telling a story with your data. So it's telling you that this month your credit score stayed stable, there are some negative factors, credit card usage is looking healthy. This is personalized information to me receiving this content. So when we're thinking about our design, think about how we can really connect it to the person that we're talking to in our copy, in our imagery, in the way that we present that information as well. It's so important to have that customer-focused strategy, and that absolutely links into your design.
Yeah, absolutely. I think personalization's one of those things that we kind of talk about every year, but the challenge with it is it's so much more than just putting dear first name. It's about using the information that we have and the things we know about a customer to actually then inform the content that we use and to make it relevant for them. So I think the ClearScore example is a great example there, where we say, here's the story of your October. Like, it's obvious that they're being upfront. They're saying, look, this is effectively tailored to you, and then also, here's some relevant information for you. So I think that's really useful. I like a nice little creative trick, like putting your initial in an image, that kind of thing. I think they're kind of sweet, and they help bring the creative to life. So I think they have their place as well. And yeah, like the LinkedIn example in the middle, I think is a good example of not just saying here's what your stats are, but turning them into something that is something you can action and actually take as a thing to actually do.
It's building that curiosity, isn't it? Here's the number of views you've had. Come and check out who actually was looking at your profile. So I absolutely love that as well. So those are some kind of trends, observations, thoughts that we've had of some of the key elements that we've seen over the last year, moving into this year, and just really some of the design elements that you need to be thinking about whenever you build an email. So if you want to know a little bit more, I've given you the links to those fantastic podcast episodes that are going to help you to get more tips and tricks on interactivity and accessibility, and we've got the podcast coming on QA process and making sure you don't have to send that email. But watch this space, because emaildesignguru.com is going to be launching soon. It's going to be a real hub for design of email and giving you inspiration so that you can take that and take those little pieces of content and go back to your business and say, hey, here's an example of interactive email. How could we do this in our business? How would it fit into our strategy? Here's a great layout design. So we're going to be bringing together a whole load of inspiration and content for you to help you build better emails. So if you've got an email that you'd like to submit to us for our gallery, please do email me at kate@e-focusmarketing.com. We're collating all those best practice examples at the moment, and we will be launching soon. So thank you very much for watching this episode. If you loved it and you want more creative reviews, please do make sure that you subscribe to our channel and that you keep coming back and looking at those episodes, sharing them with your friends, sharing them with the community, and also, again, submitting any emails that you'd like us to review to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly of what you're doing. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see you again next month.